All right, it's been a while, but want to do a podcast today on anosmia. I think that's how you say it. The loss of smell and how to kind of overcome that. There's a lot of people that are having this effect of like coronavirus and other respiratory and different types of illnesses that can trigger this. Most of the time it comes back. Sometimes it takes months, but in general, they say for coronavirus it takes a couple months. But I mean, for the people that are affected as much by that. But so you can't be impatient, I guess. But at the same time, there is some things you can do. There's also people out there that it has not come back, and those are more that can bring about depression and a lot of other different things because of the lack of. There's kind of like a sadness around all that, of course. Um, and so but so with the exception of patience and typical healing and cod liver oil and fermented cod liver oil and the things like the little carrot and ginger kind of little juices that you can make that are real small, maybe some celery too, but they're only about 2 fingers on a glass. They're baby glasses, but you take them daily, and these can help during these periods of sickness. And your body will let you know if it wants that because it'll show up very orange in your stools if none of it's being absorbed. And sometimes you'll be surprised that during some sort of sickness, you're like, wow, everything is being absorbed. Of course, you're not drinking big glasses because that's not healthy, but you're taking these small ones daily. It's like a medicinal way to weaponize these things in small doses, but on a daily basis. And so your body will let you know. And sometimes after you come out of the lung part, where you've fought and you've won over or whatever, then your body will kind of you'll start seeing the orange in the stool again if you're still continuing, and you're like, oh, okay, so the body it doesn't need this anymore, or it needs way less of it or whatever. So like a moderate, a couple of times a week or whatever. So you'll see, and your skin, the skin kind of improves too. I know that in Germany back in the old days, they would mix cream with the carrot juice, and that would create this really powerful. They use it for what was it called? Tuberculosis, convalescence, and a lot of different situations that we would think, no milk. But, this was a high quality. And so you can do that again today, but you have to really get some A2 cream, Guernsey cream, high iodine cream with like a little intense aftertaste, not these acidic creams that you try to make cheese with the milk or the cream, or you try to make cheese with that milk from that, not the cream, but and there's this acidic smell in the house, but it's like overly acidic, kind of like nasty smell. There's no sweetness in it, and so that's what we get in some of these milks. I've seen a lot of California milks that are like that. Not in the north. In the north of California, you have some really interesting areas which have a climate that resembles a little bit like Scotland. And that's a perfect milk climate up there, with that green, lush grass all year round. I mean, that's intense. So you can't reproduce that in the north, but in the south, like, let it go. So the south is generally a worse milk climate, you could say, in a general way, with the exception of certain conditions, like some place like Charleston where you have high iodine in the vegetation, and this humidity and the ocean and a lot of things that are a lot of this high oyster count. I don't know if they say you can judge a community or an area or I don't know what you would call that. I guess like a natural preserve by its oysters, and so you can see what's healthy there. I mean, it's kind of obvious when you go to Charleston. You see all these dolphins everywhere, or just like thousands of them all the time. You're like, okay, there's life here. There's something going on. But so there's certain climates in the South and mountains and different combinations that can create low or high iodine realities that can change the milk. So it's not just north-south, but there is kind of a rule that the northern milk is going to be better. It's going to be fatter, and it's going to be, a lot of times we have to import these fats and milks too, because they come from regions that has enough abundance where they can export. And so that's a sign that they're able to produce this high mineral, like, for example, the Isigny region in France, which is like, this kind of near like a marais type of area where I guess you'd say marshes. So it's not like a swamp, it's like a salt marsh. It's close to. And so this vegetation takes on a salty iodine property, and then the cows and the sheep and everything eats that, and then you have this amazing milk, right? So there's combinations like that we can't just reproduce just because we're in the middle of Texas. We're gonna like make that happen. It's like no. Sometimes you got to import. Milk may be harder to import, raw milk and all that kind of stuff, but or impossible with the FDA. But the butters and the creams and some of these things can be done. One of the biggest cream producers in the world that they use for the scones and the strawberries at Wimbledon is they call it the Queen's Cream, and that is from a place called Devonshire. And they export these little Devon creams all around the world in these little glass jars, and it stores for months and months and months if you don't open it. So there's a way to do all this to get things. It's about demand and knowing about things. So anyway, that was a little side shoot on that. But it's really important to understand milk and its iodine carrying capacity, and how that animal iodine is way better than all the vegetal iodine that people try to get you to take, or mineral iodine, or these kind of solutions and stuff. The vegetal iodine is one level, and then you have like more, like seaweed and things like that. And these things can work. I'm not saying they don't work, but it's all about assimilation, and it's all about letting the body take things in a certain type of way. And so when the animal's taking it in, and then it's in its animal form, just like with all the other vitamins, there's like 10 times more strength in it. And so that iodine that comes through high iodine milk, you can absorb immediately into the body, like immediately into the lungs, including the lactoferrin and all these things. So these things, lactoferrin is like a hidden iron inside the milk. And this helps detoxify the lungs too, even though you may think, oh, mucus, it's helping, right? It's helping push some things out. So there's a lot of understanding that has to go on to any of these podcasts, because you can't just stay on the subject, so to speak. That's like last millennium. You kind of have to stay, like you have to build a circular way that people can see what's happening with the subject that you're standing on. And so, so that's important, because we're talking about coronavirus and disease and any of these type of flu symptoms and whatever. So they're all like out there. There's a lot of fear porn, of course, with all of these things where we go too far overboard into like protecting ourselves, and things that don't work, like masks don't work, and certain things like that they're not going to stop anything, but whatever. And so just trying to learn how to get through this. And so, for the losing of smell and the anosmia, I would say that the easiest way to overcome it, outside of because if patience doesn't work and just typical healing and staying on your healing modality and homeopathy and a lot of things that I've talked about in many different podcasts, if these aren't strong enough in that moment, well, you have to wait. But if it goes beyond that, there's an interesting thing you can do. One is you kind of have to revert back to the animal, which is typically not what I recommend to people, because I don't want to take people back into the wrong direction, and anti-societal kind of direction. Although I'm a big believer in antisocial behavior. Like I think the balance needs to be between antisocial and social, not antisocial's bad. It's like you need to learn to go inside and be of your own, and to thine own self be true. And then you also need to know how to interact with others. So it's you got to develop the other side. I wouldn't call it antisocial. I would just say, kind of like inward and then outward, or whatever you want to call it. But anyway, so but coming back to the subject, yes, to go back towards the animal, if you look at pre-indigenous, pre-salt, not indigenous tribes, but pre-salt cultures, I guess you could say. I mean, every tribe may have had access to some salt, but for preservation and different things. But a lot of these tribes, if you go back far enough, like Aboriginals and stuff, like the salt that they ate was in the blood. So they would eat the blood of the animal, and that's how they got their salt. This is like way back. So are we going to go start drinking blood and all this kind of stuff? I doubt it. And even though cooked blood and like boudin sausage and a lot of different things like that are totally palatable and delicious, so that's another story. But taking this road back towards the animal would be, as soon as indigenous people started to take the salt, it started to destroy the olfactive properties, and they were not able to smell as much. And this is a fact. You can test this on yourself anyway. Salt is, you can make bombs out of salt. Salt is very explosive in the body too, and what it does. And so it's not technically, it's a good thing, like Celtic salt, not like mine salt, but like real salt that has like iodine and it's kind of wet and gray and humid and all that stuff. This is a really good thing for the brain and for the digestion and everything else, carbohydrates but so, and it's part of civilization. The whole route of civilization were created through salt routes. Like there's kind of a following of that, and so there's nothing wrong with that, but what it is when you need to go back, you have to get rid of salt completely for about 3 weeks, and you have to go into a raw meat diet, which I would never recommend normally. I wouldn't tell people go eat like raw meat for 3 weeks and become semi-animalistic and don't take any salt. Like that would be like horrible to like recommend that in a general way, because I've done that, and it's not like, 3 weeks is fine, but if you do that for 2 or 3 months, it starts to pull you out of society a little bit, and it can be overly intense to some degree. So, but this tool can be very interesting if you're stuck. If you're stuck and you can't get your odor, I was saying it in French, but if you can't get your sense of smell back because of coronavirus or flu or whatever it is, then you can do this technique. And so when you're eating the meat, you can eat it like tartare is probably the best, like the French tartare. They cut you can go buy like anything from heart to grass fed, 100% grass fed, grass finished, not grass fed, but grass finished, sorry, or 100% grass fed, which is the same thing typically. And typically from a farmer's market, not from a grocery store. But if you can find this kind of source, then you can buy like a manual grinder if you need one, and you can make the ground meat, or you can chop it like the French do with a knife, and that's actually the preferable one for the stomach because there's a little more chewing involved. And so this kind of tartare you could make daily, and this would be your main protein. Like you'd have it once or twice a day, and this would be your main protein. Everything else you can stick with, like potatoes and salad and stuff like that. But there's a little caveat: you want to stay away from salt. A little bit of mustard here and there, maybe a little bit of Tabasco every once in a while. Like there's some things like that. But with the meat, you can take like mango, or I don't really like mango, but I typically eat it with capers, but in this exact diet, you don't do that, right? So you're going to take away the salt, and you're going to, you maybe banana or some other kind of mango or something that you can eat with the meat. Now, see, typically good meat, not soy-fed animal meat and grocery store meat and all this kind of stuff. Good meat will really, if it's fresh, it'll have really no taste. It'll be almost like neutral. And as you start to eat it more and more each day, it will start to grow in its taste. Like you'll start to taste the sweetness of the meat and the sweetness of the blood, and you're going back to the animal is what's happening. And so it's not like, you don't have to think of it in like an anti-spiritual kind of sense that you're going away from spirit into like animal kingdom. You're not. You're just going for a few weeks to recover this sense back. And I don't want people to be depressed from a lack of smell and be stuck and feel like they lost this. And, I want to try to, I have a heart, I want to try to help people if I can to get out of those situations. So this is one way out. And so you would just have the meat as your main protein for 3 weeks and no salt. So you wouldn't use salt in anything, maybe a little mustard here and there, but not with every meal, not with the meat. Like you can put it on some things. You don't want to aggravate and over frustrate your system. But you want to kind of desalt a little bit. It might even help you in the future to help with salt intake, because salt is a good thing, but you can't abuse it. And especially whenever you're learning to use Celtic salt, which is like this gray, humid kind of rock, Celtic. I think Selima or something like that is the brand at Whole Foods. I don't know. So it's from France. It's from Brittany. And so this is kind of the best salt you can find. And it still has some of the iodine in there. So this is like a natural iodine salt. I'm not saying it's supposed to replace your iodine, whatever. I'm just saying it's in there. So which I don't touch anyway because that's not even iodine. That's iodide, and it's like a radioactive version of it, and so I don't even mess with that salt. But anyway, just on a little short note, one of the things I've been doing for iodine lately is I leave the vanilla extract, not Mexican, but I leave the vanilla extract on the table and on the counter now, and I use it with everything. This has a lot of cofactors which help the iodine that's already readily available in the environment. If there is readily available, it helps to assimilate it. It's like all these cofactors. So I've noticed that vanilla extract is a key player in that, like a medicine, and it should be used daily. Like I wake up in the morning and I'll have butter with my like pumpernickel rye that's toasted from Westphalia with a little Jewish star on it. This special rye where they spend 24 hours to make it, and I cut that up, mix it with the quite a nice chunk of butter and some honey, and then I pour the vanilla in there, and that's my daily kind of breakfast or whatever you want to call it. So that's a side note again. But coming back, so this will take you back. This will bring back your sense of smell, and sometimes it'll bring it back so intensely that you'll be like, you can smell people detoxing from like 10 feet. Like it can be intense. So that's why I always recommend 3 weeks and then cut it off. Don't go any further. And you've learned something about yourself, and you can strengthen yourself too in that period with the meat and the testosterone and things that come through the red meat. So it's not the most fun phase because I think that people like with going out and all that, it's not really, but you're trying to get this sense of smell back, and this is what I can tell you will work. I also did a little bit of not snorting magnesium oil, but like the transdermal, the stuff that we carry. Don't get the wrong stuff. It doesn't work the same. It has to have the Zextine inside logo on the bottle, or it's fake Zextine. So, and it's solvent extracted from Asia, not natural state, which changes its molecular capacity. So if you get the right stuff, it's always in glass bottles, blue glass bottles on our site, theheartoftradition.com. But if you, so you can snort a little bit of this or sniff it or whatever you want, bring it into and it burns, and I'm not saying a lot. You just put some on your fingers and stick that in your nose and then just kind of breathe that in. It'll sting for about 10 minutes. You'll be like, ah, and I'd probably recommend you getting used to the product first, like maybe doing some on the stomach for a few days and just getting kind of like, hello, to the product before you just go crazy in the nose. But, or you can, mix it with some water maybe and dilute it. But anyway, so if you go straight, this will help clean out some of the receptors there in the olfactive receptors. So it can help there. It won't cure it, but it'll help. And so this kind of 1-2 punch, I think, is a really positive way to get your sense of smell back if you've lost it, and also come and check us out and get the right products for that first part of it, but also for the rest. I'm here to help people, and the magnesium is so ubiquitous. It's not like I'm trying to just sell people stuff. It's like it's needed at the molecular level for a lot of stuff. And then to add to that, there's other tricks you can do. So if 2 months goes by and you haven't been able to pull up out of it, or you sense that it's not coming back, well, you have another solution. So come check us out at theheartoftradition.com.